the moment 6 men in charcoal gray suits stepped out from the sea mist on the private balcony of the LCT Landmark Tower. Sloane Whitaker knew her. Relaxing, trip to Busan had just turned into a nightmare. But the real terror didn't set in until the man they were guarding, the shadow ruler of the South Sea shipping lanes, sat down across from her. Shin Tae-Oh looked less like a businessman and more like a storm personified. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal gray suit, his silver silk tie fluttering in the salt breeze. "You're not Choi Hana," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. "But for what I have in mind, you're even better." "What is your name?" "Sloane," she whispered. "Sloane Whitaker." "Sloane," he repeated, testing the sound of it. He gave her a small, dangerous smile. Sloane tried to stand up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to tell him she was just an interior designer who had probably made a mistake. But before she could speak, Tae-Oh leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low command. "Sit back down. Do not move and do not speak. I will explain everything later, but for now you are staying right here." He stood up and looked at his guards. "Keep an eye on her. She is not to leave this seat." Sloane watched in shock as the man disappeared into the dark corners of the restaurant, leaving her trapped at the table. She had no idea that he was watching from the shadows, waiting for his real fiancé to arrive. To understand how Sloane ended up as a prisoner in a royal blue dress, we have to go back to 3 hours ago. Sloane's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have run. She should have told him she was just an interior designer who had accidentally sat at a reserved table. Have you ever been so paralyzed by a man's presence that you forgot how to speak your own name? That was Sloane in that moment. Before we go any further, hit that like button and comment below. If you were trapped on a 100th story balcony with the most dangerous man in Busan, would you tell the truth or play along? Don't forget to subscribe, because this seaside mistake is about to trigger a war that will turn the docks red. Before we see how a simple seating mistake turned into a high-stakes game, we have to go back to 3 hours earlier. 3 hours ago, Sloane had been perfectly content. She had just arrived in Busan, mesmerized by the mix of rugged mountains and neon-lit beaches. Her phone buzzed with a text from her project coordinator. "The rooftop at Hyundai, 8:00 p.m. Table 4 is reserved. It's the most exclusive spot in the city. Don't let the client wait. Wear the cobalt blue. Let them know you're here to dominate." Sloane had smiled, smoothing her hair. She thought she was dressing to secure a contract. She had no idea she was actually dressing for a revolution. The train ride from the airport had been long, but Sloane Whitaker didn't feel tired. She was too excited. As soon as she reached her hotel in the Hyundai district, she didn't even unpack. She headed straight for the bathroom to get ready for the most important dinner of her career. She felt like a bright splash of paint on a gray canvas. Most people in this part of the city wore muted tones, blacks, grays, and whites. But Sloane had always believed that if you were going to show up, you might as well be seen. Her hair was soft and long, catching the light from the neon signs above. She carried her leather portfolio tucked under her arm, her heart beating with a mix of excitement and nerves. This meeting was supposed to be the one that changed everything. As she stepped through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant, the humidity of the coast was instantly replaced by a sharp, air-conditioned chill. The lobby was silent and smelled like expensive lilies and old money. Everything was too perfect. The floors were polished white marble that reflected the ceiling lights like a frozen lake, and the walls were made of dark, heavy wood. It was the kind of place where even a footstep felt like it was making too much noise. Sloane felt the eyes of the hostess on her, a woman in a stiff black suit whose hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. Sloane gave her a bright, warm smile, the kind she had used back in Atlanta to open doors and win over clients. But here, in this sterile room, her smile didn't seem to melt the ice. The hostess looked at Sloane's vibrant dress and her gold hoop earrings with a look that wasn't exactly mean, but it wasn't friendly either. It was a look that said Sloane didn't belong in a place this quiet. "I have a reservation for table 4, Sloane said, her voice sounding loud and full of life in the quiet room. "The name is Whitaker." The woman checked a tablet, her movements slow and robotic. Table 4 is ready for you, Miss Whittaker. Please follow me. They walked past rows of empty tables, each set with heavy silver forks and crystal glasses that looked like they had never been touched. The atmosphere was heavy, almost like being in a museum where you weren't allowed to touch anything. Sloane tried to keep her energy up, but the coldness of the room was starting to seep into her bones. She noticed the other guests, few as they were speaking in whispers, their faces pale and serious. Nobody laughed. Nobody even seemed to be enjoying their food. It was a world of rigid rules and hidden meanings. The hostess led her to a private balcony that overlooked the dark waters of the harbor. "Your table," the woman whispered before disappearing back into the shadows of the main room. Sloane sat down, letting out a small sigh of relief. The view was incredible. From here, she could see the lights of the giant shipping cranes and the distant glow of the Gwangandigio Bridge. It was the perfect spot for a designer to talk about big ideas. She pulled her tablet and her sketches out of her bag, spreading them across the white tablecloth. The vibrant colors of her designs, teals, oranges, and deep purples, looked strange against the stark, colorless setting. She felt like a bird of paradise, trapped in a silver cage. She checked her watch. 7 o'clock on the dot. She was punctual, just like her project coordinator had told her to be. She took a sip of the ice water the waiter had silently placed on the table, trying to focus on the speech she had prepared. She wanted this resort project more than anything. It was her chance to show that her style, bold, warm, and soulful, could work even in a place as structured as Busan. However, as the minutes ticked by, the silence of the restaurant began to feel heavy. The air on the balcony was still, and the only sound was the distant hum of the city. The quiet of the balcony was suddenly broken by the sound of clicking heels. The noise was sharp and fast, like a clock ticking toward something dangerous. Sloane looked up from her drawings and saw a woman walking toward her. She was wearing a white suit with sharp shoulders that made her look like a queen ready for battle. Her black hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her lips were painted a deep, cold red. This was Choi Hana, though Sloane did not know her name yet. To Sloane, she just looked like ice and glass. Hana stopped 2 feet from the table. She didn't look at Sloane's face. Instead, she looked at the royal blue dress and the messy pile of sketches as if they were trash left on a sidewalk. The air around the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sloane felt a shiver run down her back. She started to stand up, her hand reaching for her portfolio. "I think there has been a mistake," Sloane began, her voice breaking. "You are in my seat," Hana interrupted. Her voice was thin and sharp. She spoke English perfectly, but her tone was full of mean pride. She didn't ask Sloane to move, she commanded it with her eyes. Behind Hana, the hostess from before was trembling, looking at the floor as if she wanted to disappear. Sloane felt her face get hot. Back in Atlanta, she was known for being kind, but she wasn't a doormat. She looked at the woman in white and felt her own stubbornness kick in. "The hostess sat me here," Sloane said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have a reservation." Hana laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was a cold snicker. She reached out a hand to sweep Sloane's sketches off the table, but before her fingers could touch the paper, a large hand gripped her wrist. Sloane gasped. She hadn't even heard him walk up. It was the man from the dark shadows of the restaurant, Tae-Oh. He stood there like a mountain, his charcoal suit looking even darker against Hana's white outfit. He didn't look angry, he looked bored, which was somehow scarier. He slowly let go of Hana's wrist and stepped around her, moving right into Sloane's space. "She isn't in your seat, Hana," Tae-Oh said. His voice was like a deep drum, vibrating in the small space of the balcony. "You are at the wrong table." Hana's face turned from pale to bright. Angry red. "Tae-Oh, don't be foolish. Our families agreed on this. Your grandmother is waiting for the news of our meeting. This table was set for us." Tae-Oh didn't even look at Hana. His eyes were locked on Sloane. He looked at her and the bright blue of her dress. A small, slow smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a warm smile, but it held a strange kind of interest. Sloane felt like she was being studied by a scientist. "My grandmother wants me to choose a partner who can handle the weight of my name," Tae-Oh said loudly. He wanted everyone in the restaurant to hear him. The waiters stopped in their tracks. The other guests put down their forks. "And I have made my choice." He reached down and picked up one of Sloane's sketches, a drawing of a building with bright, open windows. He held it up for Hana to see. I find I am tired of white suits and cold voices. I prefer something with a bit more color. Hana stepped back as if she had been slapped. You would choose a stranger, a tourist in a blue dress over an alliance with my father. Tae-Oh finally turned his head to look at Hana. His eyes were as sharp as broken glass. I would choose a statue over you, Hana, but luckily, I don't have to. He turned back to Sloane and did something that made her heart stop. He leaned down and placed a hand on the back of her chair, surrounding her with his scent of cedar and expensive leather. Forgive my fiancée's rudeness, Sloane, he said, using her name as if he had known it forever. She is having a hard time realizing that our business is finished. Why don't you show me the rest of these drawings? I think I might be the client you've been waiting for. Hana let out a small, choked sound of rage. She turned on her heel and marched away, her white suit disappearing into the dark restaurant like a ghost. Sloane sat frozen, her hand still clutching a blue pencil. She looked up at Tae-Oh, who was still leaning over her. The 6 men in suits stood at the edge of the balcony, turning their backs to give them privacy. Who are you? Sloane whispered, her heart thumping against her ribs. Tae-Oh pulled out the chair Hana was supposed to sit in and sat down. He smoothed his silver tie and looked at her. Right now, I am the only reason you are going to leave this restaurant safely. So play along, Sloane, smile for the cameras. Because as of 1 minute ago, you are the most famous woman in Busan. The air on the balcony felt heavy as Choi Hana disappeared into the restaurant. Sloane wanted to run, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. She looked at Shin Tae-Oh, who was now leaning back in his chair as if he had just finished a normal business meeting. He didn't look like a man who had just ended an engagement in front of a dozen witnesses. He looked like a man who had just won a game he had been playing for a long time. We cannot speak here, Tae-Oh said, his voice quiet but firm. He stood up and held out his hand. It wasn't an invitation, it was a command. Sloane looked at his large hand, then at the 6 men in suits who were now watching her with blank faces. She realized she didn't have much of a choice. She gathered her colorful sketches, her fingers shaking as she stuffed them back into her leather portfolio. She stood up, her royal blue dress rustling in the sea breeze, and followed him. They walked through a hidden door at the back of the restaurant that led to a private lounge. This room was even colder and more silent than the rest of the building. The walls were covered in dark velvet, and the only light came from a few dim lamps that cast long shadows on the floor. Tae-Oh sat down on a leather sofa and pointed to a chair across from him. Once the door clicked shut, the noise of the city outside vanished completely. You are very brave, Sloane, Tae-Oh began. He poured a glass of water from a crystal bottle on the table and pushed it toward her. Most people would have been screaming by now, or at least crying. Sloane took a sip of the water, her throat feeling dry. I'm too confused to cry, she admitted. Who was that woman? And why did you tell her I was your choice? I don't even know you. Tae-Oh leaned forward, his silver tie catching the dim light. That woman was Choi Hana. Her family is very powerful in Busan. They own the ships, the docks, and the men who work on them. Our families planned for us to marry to join our businesses together. It was a blood pact, a promise that cannot be easily broken. Sloane felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. If it's a promise that can't be broken, then why did you just break it? Because an alliance with the Choi family is a cage I refuse to live in, he replied, his eyes turning dark. But by choosing you in public, I have made you a part of this world. To Hana and her father, you are not just a stranger anymore. You are the woman who embarrassed them. You are a target. Sloane dropped her glass, the ice clinking loudly against the side. A target? I just sat at the wrong table. I have a job to do here. I have a life. Tae-Oh nodded slowly. I know, and if you walk out of that door right now, I cannot guarantee you will make it back to your hotel. The Choi family does not like to lose. They will want to remove the distraction that made me say no. Sloane felt the walls of the dark room closing in on her. So, what are you saying? That I'm stuck? I am offering you a contract, Tae-Oh said, his voice turning professional. A contract of silence and protection. You will play the part of my fiancé for 1 month. You will live where I tell you to live, and you will go where I tell you to go. In exchange, my men will make sure no one from the Choi family touches a hair on your head. I will also make sure your design project is finished perfectly. No one will get in your way. 1 month, Sloane whispered. You want me to lie for a whole month? It is the only way to keep you alive until I can settle the debt with Hana's father, Tae-Oh explained. If the world thinks we are truly in love, they will hesitate to strike. They will wait to see what I do next. That time is what we need. Sloane looked at the door, then back at the man in the charcoal suit. He was offering her safety, but it felt like he was also offering her a different kind of prison. She thought about her family back home, her career, and the beautiful resort she wanted to build. Everything was at risk because of a simple seating mistake. And if I say no? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Tae-Oh stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Busan harbor. Then you face the Choi family alone. And trust me, Sloane, they do not have a soft spot for artists. Sloane looked down at her blue dress. It was so bright and full of life, but in this dark room it almost looked black. She realized that her ordinary life was gone. She took a deep breath and stood up. 1 month, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. But I am not a toy, I am a partner. You protect me and I play the part. But after 30 days, I want my life back. Tae-Oh turned away from the window, and for the first time, a look of genuine respect crossed his face. Deal, he said softly. Welcome to the family, Sloane. The walk out of the restaurant felt like a blur of flashing lights and hushed whispers. Tae-Oh did not let go of Sloane's arm as they moved through the lobby. His guards formed a human wall around them, pushing back the curious guests and the few photographers who had gathered at the entrance. Sloane kept her head down, her leather portfolio pressed against her chest like a shield. She could feel the cold night air hitting her face as they stepped onto the sidewalk, where a line of 3 black cars sat idling with their lights off. Get in, Tae-Oh commanded, opening the door of the middle car. As soon as Sloane slid onto the leather seat, the door clicked shut, locking out the noise of the city. Tae-Oh sat beside her, staring straight ahead. He didn't say a word as the car sped away from the harbor. Sloane looked out the back window and saw the other 2 cars follow closely behind. They were moving fast, weaving through the neon-lit streets of Busan like sharks in deep water. Where are you taking me? Sloane asked, her voice small. My hotel is in the other direction. You cannot go back to your hotel, Tae-Oh replied without looking at her. Hana's brothers have likely already sent men there to wait for you. For now, you will stay at my private estate on the north side of the city. It is the only place the Choi family cannot enter. They arrived at a massive gate hidden behind tall stone walls. The house was a masterpiece of glass and steel, perched on a hill overlooking the sea. It was beautiful, but it felt more like a fortress than a home. Tae-Oh led her to a guest suite that was larger than her entire apartment in New York. The walls were white, the furniture was modern. And a large window showed the distant glow of the city. There are fresh clothes in the closet, Tae-Oh said, standing in the doorway. My staff has already brought your luggage from the hotel. Sleep now. Tomorrow we leave for the mountains. We need to disappear for a few days until the dust settles. How did your staff get my luggage? She asked, her eyes wide. I never told you where I was staying. Tae-Oh didn't turn his head, but a small, cold smile touched his lips. Sloane, the moment I decided you were staying at that table, my head of security, Junho, was already working. He took a photo of your ID from your bag while you were distracted by the menu. By the time Choi Hana arrived, my men had already tracked your reservation to the Hyatt. Sloane felt a chill. She realized that while she was worrying about her sketches, Tae-Oh's team was moving like a machine. They didn't just grab your bags, Tae-Oh added quietly. They paid your bill, checked you out, and made sure no one was following the bellhop. In my world, information moves faster than bullets. If I didn't know where you lived, I couldn't keep you alive. It was a scary thought, but it also made her feel strangely safe. She wasn't just a girl in a blue dress anymore. She was part of a system that didn't miss a single detail. Sloane felt a chill. She realized that while she was worrying about her sketches, Tae-Oh's team was moving like a machine. Sloane didn't sleep well that night. Every time the wind rattled the window, she thought of Choi Hana's angry face. She looked at the royal blue dress hanging in the closet and realized her life had changed forever. She was safe for now, but she was living in a world of shadows. The car ride up the winding mountain roads was quiet. Sloane looked out the window as the busy lights of Busan faded into a soft, blue mist. Tae-Oh sat beside her, his long legs cramped in the back of the black sedan. He wasn't looking at his phone or checking papers. He was just watching the trees pass by. For a man who ran a giant business empire, he seemed unusually calm. Sloane gripped her sketchbook tightly. She still felt like she was in a dream, one that could turn into a nightmare at any moment. But for now, the only sound was the hum of the tires on the road. They arrived at a traditional tea house nestled high on a cliff. It was a beautiful building made of dark wood with a tiled roof that curved toward the sky. There were no flashing signs or loud music here. The air was thin and smelled like pine needles and damp earth. As they stepped out of the car, Sloane could see the entire harbor below. The giant ships looked like tiny toys in the water. "There are no cameras here," Tae-Oh said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "And no one from the Choi family can reach this high without my men knowing. You can breathe here, Sloane." He led her to a wide wooden porch that looked out over the edge of the mountain. A small table was set with a simple teapot and 2 cups. There were no servants, and his guards had stayed back at the gate. It was just the two of them. Sloane sat down on a soft mat, feeling the cool breeze on her face. She felt a little strange being so alone with him. Usually they were surrounded by tension and suits, but here, the silence was almost comfortable. She didn't know what to say, so she did the only thing that made her feel normal. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She began to draw the way the roof of the tea house met the sky. She lost herself in the lines and shadows, her pencil moving quickly. She forgot about the Mafia, the fake Fiancee contract, and the angry woman in the white suit. Tae-Oh didn't try to start a conversation. He poured the tea and sat back, resting his chin on his hand. At first, Sloane thought he was just bored. She expected him to get impatient or start talking about business. But when she looked up, she realized he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her hands. He was watching the way she gripped the pencil and the focused look in her eyes. "Why do you put the windows there?" he asked suddenly. He wasn't pointing at her dress or her face. He was pointing at a small detail in her sketch. Sloane blinked, surprised. "Oh, because the light in Busan is strongest in the afternoon. If the windows are angled this way, the room will glow without needing any electricity. It makes the space feel more alive." Tae-Oh nodded slowly. He didn't just look at the drawing, he seemed to be thinking about the logic behind it. You don't just want things to look pretty, you want them to work for the people inside. "Design isn't just a decoration," Sloane explained, her voice growing more confident. "It's about how a person feels when they walk into a room. If a room is too cold or too dark, it changes how you think. It can make you feel small or trapped." Tae-Oh went silent for a moment. He looked down at his own teacup. "I think I have lived in cold, dark rooms for a very long time," he whispered. For the first time, Sloane didn't see him as a scary boss. She saw a man who was genuinely curious about her world. He wasn't interested in her because she was a beautiful foreigner in a blue dress. He was interested because she had a mind that saw things he didn't. He asked her more questions, about materials, about the history of buildings, and about why she loved color so much. As the sun began to set, turning the sky into a mix of pink and gold, Sloane realized she was actually enjoying herself. The fear that had been sitting in her chest since the restaurant began to lift. She saw the way Tae-Oh's eyes softened when she explained a difficult concept. He wasn't just playing a part. He was really listening. In this quiet place above the harbor, the line between their fake contract and a real connection was starting to get blurry. She had come to the mountains to hide, but for the first time, she felt like she was truly being seen. The calm of the mountain tea house did not stay with them when they returned to the heart of Busan. The air in the city felt thick again, filled with the smell of salt and the constant hum of cars. For their dinner that evening, Tae-Oh had chosen a small, quiet restaurant tucked away in a corner of the harbor. There were no large crowds and no flashy lights. It was just a simple room with big windows that looked out over the black water of the docks. Sloane wore a black dress, though she had added a light sweater to stay warm. Across from her, Tae-Oh looked as sharp as ever in his charcoal suit, but he seemed a bit more relaxed after their time in the mountains. They were talking about Sloane's project again. She was explaining how she wanted to use local stone for the lobby of the resort. Tae-Oh was listening closely, his chin resting on his hand. For a moment, Sloane forgot that they were living a lie. She forgot about the angry Choi family and the dangerous men who followed Tae-Oh everywhere. It felt like a real date, the kind where two people simply enjoy each other's company. "I think the stone from the Busan cliffs would be perfect," Tae-Oh said, his voice low and steady. "It shows that the building belongs to the sea." Sloane smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "Exactly. I want it to feel strong yet beautiful." She reached for her glass of water, but before her fingers could touch it, the world seemed to explode. A sharp, cracking sound, like a heavy branch snapping in a storm, echoed through the room. A tiny, perfect hole appeared in the large glass window right next to Sloane's head. Then, the entire pane of glass shattered into 1,000 tiny diamonds. Everything happened in a blur. Sloane didn't even have time to scream before she felt a powerful weight slam into her. Tae-Oh had lunged across the table, his large frame knocking her out of her chair and onto the hard floor. He moved with a speed she had never seen before. He used his body like a shield, covering her completely as more glass rained down on them. "Stay down, don't move," Tae-Oh barked. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was raw and full of a cold, focused anger. Sloane pressed her face into the rug, her heart thumping so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. She could hear the sound of his men shouting outside and the screeching of tires on the pavement. Another shot rang out, hitting a metal light fixture above them with a loud twang. Sloane began to shake, the reality of the danger finally hitting her. This wasn't a design problem. This was a war. "Tae-Oh," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you hurt?" He didn't answer right away. He was busy looking over the edge of the table, his eyes searching the dark harbor outside for the source of the attack. His hand was gripped tightly around her shoulder, and she could feel how much he was shaking, too. But it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Slowly, the sounds of the shooting stopped. The silence that followed was even scarier. Tae-Oh didn't let go of her. He stayed over her for several long minutes until his head of security, Junho, burst through the door with his weapon drawn. "The area is clear," Junho said, his voice breathless. "They were on the roof of the warehouse across the water. They are gone now." Only then did Tae-Oh sit back, though he stayed on the floor with Sloane. He reached out and gently brushed a few shards of glass off her dress. His hands, which usually looked so strong and untouchable, were shaking. Sloane looked up at him and saw something she hadn't expected. His face wasn't the mask of a Mafia boss anymore. He looked pale, and his eyes were full of a deep, painful worry. "Sloane," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Look at me, are you bleeding?" She shook her head, unable to find her words. She saw a small cut on his cheek where a piece of glass had caught him, and a dark bruise was already forming on his arm where he had hit the floor. He didn't seem to notice his own pain. He was only focused on her. In that moment, the lethal elegance vanished. Beneath the expensive suit and the scary name, Sloane saw a man who was terrified of losing her. She saw the human beneath the boss, a man who felt the weight of every life he tried to protect. He reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his touch surprisingly soft. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I promised you that you would be safe. I failed you." Sloane reached up and touched the cut on his cheek. She realized that he wasn't just protecting her because of a contract. He was protecting her because he truly cared. The fear in her chest began to change into something else, a deep, complicated bond with the man who had just saved her life. As his men helped them up, Sloane knew that the fake part of their story was officially over. The danger was real, but so was the look in Tae-Oh's eyes. Living in the west wing of Tae-Oh's estate felt like living in a beautiful museum. After moving in on that first night, Sloane realized she was stuck. She couldn't go to the business meeting she had traveled across the world for. She was safe behind these stone walls, but her dreams were starting to slip away. That morning, Sloane received an email that made her heart sink. It was from the company she was supposed to meet. They told her that a group of men had showed up at their office, warning them not to hire the American girl. They had even smashed the glass in the lobby of the company's building to show they were serious. The email said they were too scared to work with her now. Sloane felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the tall stone walls outside her window. The Choi family was trying to destroy her career because they couldn't get to her person. They were turning her name into a curse in Busan. "They are taking everything from me," Sloane whispered, her eyes filling with tears. She looked around the giant guest room. It was huge and expensive, but it was so gray and empty. It reminded her of the coldness of the Choi family. She decided right then that if she was stuck in this golden cage for her own safety, she was going to change it. She wasn't going to let the shadows win. She started by calling the house staff. At first, they were nervous because Tae-Oh liked everything to stay exactly the same. But Sloane didn't listen. She had them move the heavy black sofa toward the sunlight. She asked for soft blue rugs, bright orange pillows, and tall green plants to be brought in. She found a storage room filled with old, forgotten items from Tae-Oh's family history. She found colorful silk pillows, warm woolen blankets, and even a few paintings that had been hidden away because they were too bright. By the afternoon, the secure wing didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a home. She even went into the main hallway and opened the heavy velvet curtains to let the sun hit the marble floor. She spent hours rearranging the lighting. Tae-Oh's house used harsh, blue-tinted lights that made everything look like a hospital. Sloane replaced them with warmer bulbs that made the wood glow. She bought fresh flowers from a small market nearby, with Junho following her closely for safety, and placed them in every room. The smell of lilies was replaced by the sweet scent of jasmine and roses. One evening, Tae-Oh walked into the main living area and stopped in his tracks. He looked around as if he had walked into the wrong house. The cold, dark room he was used to was now filled with soft light. A deep orange blanket was draped over the sofa, and a collection of Sloane's sketches was pinned to a board in the corner. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt alive. "What have you done to my house?" he asked, though his voice didn't sound angry. It sounded surprised. Sloane was sitting on the floor, surrounded by fabric samples. She looked up at him with a brave smile. "I'm redesigning it, Tae-Oh. You told me you lived in dark rooms for a long time. I thought it was time for some light." Tae-Oh walked over and sat on the sofa. He touched the soft fabric of the orange blanket. He looked at the way the warm light hit the walls. He seemed to relax for the first time since they had met at the restaurant. Sloane realized that by changing the house, she was also changing him. She was literal and figurative in her work. She was fixing the building, but she was also softening the sharp edges of the man who lived inside it. As the days passed, Tae-Oh started spending more time in the rooms Sloane had fixed. They would sit together in the evenings, not talking about the Mafia or the Choi family, but about the small things that made a home feel real. Sloane was no longer just a fake fiancé. She was becoming the heart of the estate. She had turned his golden cage into a sanctuary, and in doing so, she had found a place where she finally felt she belonged. The danger was still outside the gates, but inside, the world was finally starting to look bright house. The peace inside the west wing of the estate was short-lived. Sloane had spent the morning working on her sketches, trying to forget about the email from her potential clients. She was starting to feel like she could handle this new life, but a sudden buzz from her phone changed everything. It wasn't a call from Tae-Oh or a message from her friend Derek. It was a video link from an unknown number. When Sloane clicked the link, her heart dropped into her stomach. The screen showed a high-end office in New York. It was the headquarters of the design firm where she had worked for 3 years. The camera panned to a woman sitting in a leather chair. It was Choi Hana. She looked perfectly calm, her white suit standing out against the dark wood of the office. She wasn't in Busan anymore. She had flown halfway across the world just to prove a point. "Hello, Sloane," Hana said, her voice sounding tinny through the phone's speaker. "Or should I say, the girl who sat at the wrong table. I did a little bit of digging. It turns out you aren't a secret princess or a wealthy heir. You are just a girl from Atlanta who is very desperate for a job." Sloane felt the walls of the room closing in on her. She hadn't realized how easy it would be for someone like Hana to find her. In the world of the powerful, there were no secrets. "I am sitting in your boss's office right now," Hana continued, a mean smile touching her lips. I told him all about your new friendship with the Shin family. I told him you are involved with people who break windows and start wars in the streets. He was very shocked to hear that his star designer is hanging out with the Mafia. Stop it, Sloane whispered to the empty room, her eyes filling with tears. This has nothing to do with my work. Hana leaned closer to the camera. It has everything to do with your work. In my world, reputation is the only thing that matters. I have already made sure that every big design firm in New York knows your name. But not for your drawings. They know you as a troublemaker. If you don't leave Seoul by tonight, I will make sure you never pick up a pencil in that city again. You will be blacklisted. You will be nothing. The video ended, leaving Sloane in a cold, heavy silence. She looked at her sketches on the table, the bright colors and the bold lines she had worked so hard on. Everything she had built in her life was being burned down by a woman she had only met once. Hana wasn't just attacking her safety, she was attacking her soul. Sloane heard the door open and turned to see Tae-Oh standing there. He must have seen the look on her face, because he dropped his briefcase and walked toward her immediately. What happened? He asked, his voice sharp with concern. Sloane couldn't speak. She just handed him the phone. Tae-Oh watched the video, his jaw tightening until a small muscle jumped in his cheek. He looked at the screen, then at Sloane, who was shaking with fear and anger. She went to New York, Sloane finally said, her voice cracking. She's at my office. She told them I'm a criminal. Tae-Oh, she's going to destroy everything I've worked for. I have to go back. I have to fix this. Tae-Oh took her hands in his. His grip was strong and warm, trying to ground her. If you go back now, you are doing exactly what she wants. She wants to pull you away from me so she can feel powerful again. She wants to show the city that she can break anyone who gets in her way. But my career, Sloane cried. It's all I have. I'm not like you. I don't have millions of dollars or guards to protect me. I just have my work. Tae-Oh looked her in the eyes, his gaze intense. You have me. And Hana thinks she is the only one with influence in New York, but she is wrong. My family has friends there, too. He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. Do not give her the satisfaction of seeing you run. Stay here. Let me handle the Choi family. I promise you, Sloane, when this month is over, your career will be bigger than it ever was. But if you leave now, she wins. Sloane looked at him, feeling torn between the life she knew and the dangerous man standing in front of her. She realized that Hana's revenge wasn't just about a seat at a table. It was a test. If she stayed, she was choosing to trust Tae-Oh with her entire future. She took a deep breath, her heart still racing. The contract of silence had just become a battle for her very identity, and for the first time, Sloane felt the fire of a real fight starting in her chest. The rain in Busan did not fall softly that night. It slammed against the large windows of the estate, making a sound like thousands of tiny drumsticks. Inside the house, the air was still and smelled of cold rain and expensive tea. Sloane sat on the edge of the large, velvet sofa in the library. She was looking at her sketchbook, but she wasn't drawing. Her mind was stuck on the way the world had changed in just a few short weeks. She looked down at her royal blue dress, which was now dry and clean, but she could still remember the feeling of the cold floor and the sound of breaking glass from the restaurant. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and Shin Tae-Oh walked in. He had taken off his suit jacket, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the neck. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes showed that he hadn't slept in days. He didn't look like a scary mafia boss right now. He just looked like a man carrying a weight that was too heavy for anyone to bear. In his hand, he held a small, white envelope. He walked over to the window and watched the lightning flash over the harbor. The Choi family is moving faster than I thought, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Hana's father is angry. He is calling in favors from across the country. They aren't just coming for my business anymore. They are coming for anyone close to me. Sloane felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. What does that mean for us? Tae-Oh turned around. He walked to the table and laid the white envelope down in front of her. It means the contract is over, Sloane. Inside that envelope is a first-class plane ticket back to Atlanta. It leaves in 4 hours. There is also a passport with a new name and enough money to make sure you never have to worry about a client again. Sloane stared at the envelope. This was what she had wanted from the very first night. She had asked for her life back. She had begged for the 30 days to be over so she could go back to her sketches and her quiet apartment. But now that the ticket was sitting right there, she didn't reach for it. Her heart felt heavy, like it was made of lead. "I have a car waiting downstairs," Tae-Oh continued. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "Junho will take you to the airport. Once you are in the air, you will be safe. They won't follow you to America. You can forget you ever sat at the wrong table. You can forget you ever met me." "Is that what you want?" Sloane asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "For me to forget." Tae-Oh finally looked at her. His eyes were full of a deep, hidden pain. "I want you to live," he said. "My world is full of shattered glass and shadows. You are full of light and color. If you stay here, the shadows will eventually swallow you up. I can't let that happen." Sloane stood up. She didn't look at the ticket. She walked over to him until she was standing just a foot away. She could see the small scar on his cheek from the night of the shooting. She remembered how he had used his own body to shield her. She remembered the mountain tea house and the way he had truly listened to her ideas. She realized that she had fallen for the man behind the mask. She loved the way he protected his people. She loved the quiet way he looked at her drawings. She even loved the lethal elegance, because she knew it was a wall he built to keep the world out. "I spent my whole life trying to be independent," Sloane said. "I thought that meant I didn't need anyone. But these past few weeks, I realized that being alone isn't the same as being strong." She reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm and rough. "You think you're saving me by sending me away, but you're wrong. If I leave now, I'll be safe, but I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if you're okay. I'll spend every day looking at the door, hoping you'll walk through it." Tae-Oh gripped her hand back, his fingers tight. "Sloane, you don't understand. If you stay, there is no going back. To the rest of the world, you are now the woman tied to a man that half the city wants to destroy. Even if we aren't married, they will treat you like my wife. They will target you to get to me." Sloane picked up the envelope, and without breaking eye contact, she ripped it in half. The pieces of the plane ticket fluttered to the floor like falling snow. "I'm a designer, Tae-Oh," she said, a small, brave smile touching her lips. "I know how to fix broken things, and I think this world could use a little more color. I'm staying." Tae-Oh didn't say anything for a long time. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. For the first time since she had met him, she felt his heartbeat racing as fast as hers. The choice was made. The fake contract was gone, replaced by something much more dangerous and much more real. Sloane wasn't a guest anymore. She was his, and she was ready to fight for the life they were building together. The fog at the Busan port was so thick that the giant shipping containers looked like ghosts in the dark. Sloane sat in the passenger seat of the black car, her fingers digging into the leather of her seat. She was a cream suit piece, but she had a dark jacket pulled tight over her shoulders. She looked at Tae-Oh, who was checking a small silver watch. His face was as hard as stone. He had come here to talk to Choi Hana's father one last time to end the war, but the air felt heavy with a danger that had nothing to do with the ocean. "Stay in the car, Sloane," Tae-Oh said. His voice was very quiet. "If anything goes wrong, Junho will get you out of here." "Tae-Oh, wait," Sloane whispered, reaching for his arm. "This feels wrong, it's too quiet." Tae-Oh didn't say anything. He simply squeezed her hand and stepped out into the mist. He walked toward the center of the docks where a single light hung from a tall pole. Sloane watched him through the window, her heart thumping. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her lap. It was a message from Henry, her friend, who had been helping her stay connected to the outside world. "Sloane, tell your guy to stop." The message read, "I'm flying my drone over the docks to get some night shots for my portfolio, and I see things he can't see. There are men on the roofs of the containers. They have rifles. It's a trap." Sloane's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Tae-Oh, who was now standing alone under the light, waiting for a man who wasn't coming. She looked at Junho, who was standing by the car door, his eyes scanning the ground level. They were looking for trouble in front of them, but the real danger was above. "Junho," Sloane scrambled out of the car, ignoring his order to stay inside. She ran to the head of security and shoved her phone into his face. "Look, my friend Henry is flying his drone right now. He sees snipers on the red containers to the left and the blue ones behind the crane." Junho's eyes went wide. He grabbed the phone and saw the grainy, thermal images Henry was sending in real time. On the screen, 4 bright white shapes, the heat from human bodies, were crouched on top of the shipping crates, aiming down at Tae-Oh. "Get the boss," Junho shouted into his radio. But it was too late to shout. If they made a noise, the snipers would fire. Junho looked at the phone again. Derek was sending exact coordinates now. Red container, north corner. Blue container, third row. "Sloane, get back in the car and stay on the floor," Junho commanded. He didn't wait for her to move. He signaled to his team of guards who were hidden in the shadows. Because of Henry's eye in the sky, Junho knew exactly where the enemies were hiding. Tae-Oh stood perfectly still under the light. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know where to turn. Just as a small red laser dot appeared on Tae-Oh's charcoal suit, Junho's team moved. They didn't fire toward the ground, they fired upward. Because they had the coordinates from the drone, they didn't have to guess. The sound of gunfire echoed across the water, loud and sharp. Sloane curled into a ball on the floor of the car, covering her ears. She heard the heavy thud of bodies falling onto the metal roofs above. Then she heard Junho's voice screaming, "Boss, down, down." Tae-Oh dove behind a stack of wooden pallets just as the remaining snipers returned fire. But the element of surprise was gone. Junho and his men moved like a storm, using Henry's live updates to flank the ambushers. Above them, the tiny drone buzzed like an angry insect, hovering right over the heads of the attackers so Junho's men could find them in the fog. It was over in less than 3 minutes. The silence that returned to the docks was cold and heavy. Sloane slowly lifted her head and looked out the window. She saw Tae-Oh standing up, brushing the dirt off his suit. He looked toward the car, his eyes searching for her. Junho walked over to Tae-Oh and handed him Sloane's phone. He pointed up at the sky, where the tiny green light of the drone was still circling. Tae-Oh walked to the car and opened the door. He reached in and pulled Sloane out, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. He didn't say a word for a long time. He just held her while the fog swirled around them. "Your friend saved my life," Tae-Oh finally whispered into her hair. "And you saved me by listening to him." Sloane leaned against his chest, her royal blue dress wrinkled and stained with salt. She looked up at the little drone disappearing into the dark. She had always thought her world of cameras and art was so different from his world of power and war. But tonight, they had worked together. The rescue wasn't done with a grand army. It was done with a friend and a piece of technology. As the guards began to clear the area, Sloane realized that they were finally a real team. The Choi family had tried their final move, and they had lost. Tae-Oh was safe, and for the first time, the lethal elegance of his life felt like it might finally be replaced by peace. The car ride back from the docks was silent for a long time. Tae-Oh sat with his head leaning back against the seat, his eyes closed. His hand was still wrapped tightly around Sloane's. Outside, the city lights of Busan blurred past the window. Finally, he turned his head and looked at her. "How did you know, Sloane?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. "You didn't just see those snipers by accident, and that drone. My men didn't fly that." Sloane took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't keep the secret anymore. "I overheard you," she admitted. "2 nights ago, I heard you talking to Junho in the hallway. You were discussing the peace talk at the harbor. I heard the location and the time. I knew it was a trap, even if you didn't." Tae-Oh's eyes narrowed. "So you decided to follow me?" "No," Sloane said. "I decided to call the only person I trust in this country. His name is Henry. We went to college together in Georgia, and he's been living here in Busan for 6 months working as a professional photographer. He knows the city better than I do." Tae-Oh stayed quiet, letting her finish. "I called him as soon as I heard your phone call," she continued. "I told him I was in trouble and needed an extra pair of eyes." Since he was already at the harbor tonight taking long-exposure photos of the ships, he brought his high-tech drone. He was the one who sent the signal to my phone when he saw the men in black jackets moving on the roofs. Tae-Oh looked out the window at the dark sea. You risked your life and your friend's life to save mine. Why? Sloane looked at the ring on her finger. Because when I sat at that table, I made a choice. And when Choi Hana tried to ruin my life, you didn't let her. You protected my dream, Tae-Oh. It was time I protected yours. Tae-Oh reached out and touched her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. He didn't look like a scary boss in that moment. He looked like a man who finally realized he wasn't fighting alone. I'll have my men find your friend Henry, Tae-Oh said softly. If he's going to help us, he needs to be under my protection, too. From now on, no more secrets between us. If we are going to survive the Choi family, we do it as a team. Sloane nodded, feeling a huge weight lift off her shoulders. She had started this journey as a girl looking for a contract, but now she was a player in a much bigger game. And with Derek watching from the skis and Tae-Oh by her side, she knew the fight was only beginning. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the West Wing, lighting up the colorful rugs and plants Sloane had added to the room. Tae-Oh sat on the edge of the dark marble table, watching Sloane as she sketched a new design. The high-speed chase and the danger of the docks felt like a lifetime ago. For the first time, they weren't talking about snipers or the Choi family. They were talking about the future. Especially since the news had broken that morning Choi Hana's father was officially retiring and stepping away from the family business. The truce is holding, Tae-Oh said, his voice quiet. With Hana's father gone, the new leadership isn't looking for a fight. The war is over, Sloane, you're safe. You've been staring at that page for 20 minutes, Tae-Oh said, his voice quiet and curious. What are you thinking about, Sloane? And don't tell me it's just about the color of a wall. Sloane put her pencil down and looked up at him. I'm glad. But now that the dust has settled, I'm thinking about what happens when this month is over. I'm thinking about my work. Tae-Oh crossed his arms, his expression becoming serious. I want you to stay in Busan. I think you know that by now. But I also know your life is back in New York. Sloane shook her head slowly. I've realized that I don't want to go back to that quiet life, Tae-Oh. But I also don't believe in long-distance dating. It never works. People drift apart, and I don't want that for us. But the problem is, I don't know any design firms here that are hearing, especially after Hana tried to ruin my name. Tae-Oh stepped closer, a confident smile touching his lips. That is not a problem at all. I have many connections in this city. If you want to work here, I can make sure the top firms are fighting to hire you. No one will care what the Choi family says if the Shin family is backing your talent. Sloane smiled, but she didn't look completely convinced. Thank you, Tae-Oh. I know you could do that. But if I stay, I want to do it the right way. I don't want to be a guest in your big house forever, and I don't want to depend on you for everything. Tae-Oh raised an eyebrow. What are you saying? I want to have my own place, Sloane said firmly. I want to be independent. I want my own apartment where I can hang my own art and drink my coffee in peace. If we are going to be a real couple, I need to know that I'm standing on my own 2 feet, not just living in your shadow. Tae-Oh looked at her for a long moment. Most people in his world would do anything to stay in his palace, but Sloane was different. She wanted her own power. He felt a surge of respect for her that was even stronger than his attraction. I understand, he whispered, reaching out to tuck a curl behind her ear. I like that about you. You aren't looking for a savior, you're looking for a partner. I will help you find the best apartment in the city, and I'll make sure you get a contract that makes you the boss of your own projects. Sloane leaned into his touch, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt since she arrived. A partner, she repeated. I like the sound of that. Tae-Oh reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Sloane's eyes went wide, and she took a step back, her heart racing. Tae-Oh, she said, her voice shaking. I hope that's not what I think it is. We just finished one fake engagement. I'm not ready for a real one yet. Tae-Oh laughed softly and opened the box. Inside was not a ring, but a beautiful gold necklace with a small, glowing sapphire. Don't worry, he said, stepping closer to put it around her neck. It's just a necklace. I wanted to give you something to remind you of today and of the day we met at the restaurant. He fastened the clasp and leaned down to whisper in her ear. But don't get too comfortable. When I do propose, and it will be soon, it will be with a ring that matches how much you've changed my life. I can't imagine living in this big, empty house alone anymore. You've brought the light back, Sloane." Sloane touched the cool stone at her throat and smiled. The war was over, and her new life in Busan was just beginning.